The next comment or question is from Michelle. Hi, Daktari. Would you ask Professor if he can kindly support a needy student financially, especially those struggling to pay fees? Maybe you'll say something about that.
Yes,
Um,
we ran a foundation which we've been running for the last 30 years. And many times we support students, but the other thing is that if the student makes a case, we are able to link that student with other institutions who can support the student. And I always tell students, yesterday a student came to me and told me I have no fees. I said, even if you had no fees, you have not made your case. When you are making your case, I want you to make a case which tells me I'm in first year. My education for the next 4 years is going to be this. This is my family circumstances. So when I send you to some institution, they know that you need 500,000 CD or Naira or shillings, and then it can't be done. So make your case, sell yourself, and sell your problem in a manner that it can be bought and responded to positively.
Thank you. I hope Michelle has heard that. Then, Emoit, from a Pan-Africanist perspective, Prof, what do you make of the situation in South Africa? I have always believed that our potential as a continent hinges on unity and integration. I think you've discussed this already. Yeah, then again, Nana comments, the European Union is protecting markets and it is difficult to find most of the Chinese products there. Again, that's a comment. Emoit, when I look at the xenophobia in South Africa as a Pan-Africanist, my spirit is dampened. Is there really hope that one day the continent will unite and integrate despite our ethnic divide? Comments. Nana, Prof, concerning the importation of inferior goods, it's not only in Kenya, but also other African countries. I think that's just a comment. And Eugene Owade, Prof, keep inspiring our generation to do what's best for our country, academy, and person. Aluta continua. Then Jimmy, how can Africa balance cultural identity and indigenous governance values with the demands of globalization and international legal systems? An example is how Article 2.5 of the Constitution of Kenya was interpreted. I don't know if you want to comment on this, Prof.
Yes, perhaps is worthy of comment. I'm just looking at the general rules of international. I have Article 2.5 before me. The supremacy of the general rules of international law shall form part of the law of Kenya. And the students of international law will know about use cogens. And when one appreciates that, it enjoins us to look at the general principle, look at the very deliberate rendition that is the general principles, which means from where I sit, that it is not every other thing that makes the claim that is international law that then becomes part of international law. But look at the intention of what we were trying to do when this particular provision was inserted. We took the view that there are certain areas, remember the whole approach of dualism and monism, because technically we are dualist as Kenya, that until and unless we incorporate and legislate and domesticate, then that part does not form international law. But in the face of this, we are saying that the general principles only shall be applicable. The argument that I've seen being put forth, I too have put them forth, that in matters of specificity, we must not be enjoined to follow the specifics, but if it is a notorious principle of international law which has formed part of what is jus cogens, then it becomes part of our law. But it is also something that, in my view, enables a judge or a bench that wants to apply good principles. Look at, for example, the principle of universal jurisdiction, which was articulated very well in the Augusto Pinochet case. If you have a good judge or a bench which wants to run away from the strictures of domestic law and wants to apply what is characterized as international law, this is the avenue that you use. But sometimes there is what I call intellectual laziness on the part of judicial officers. And therefore they are saying, oh, that does not apply. It is not, show me the act. I've been in court where saying, show me the act. You are being too academic. That's what they tell some of us when you are bringing in these things. And good work to be done. And one of the good things that is happening, I don't know whether it's happening as well as it should, this thing we call continuous legal professional education is critical for judicial officers, even for lawyers, because the law is changing so very dynamically that if you don't keep abreast with the changes, you will be illiterate effectively. So continuous education is critical at all times. And this is how I understand this interaction by Doctor, that all of us, when we come out of this session, there are things that we have just mentioned. You go and interact around them. When you sit under a tree at your university, you're going, but this thing that was raised, what is it about? When we talk about immigration in South Africa, what does it mean? Does it mean that you can simply have a group of vigilantes who are going to a business that has been set up for 10 years and then they throw out people? Do those people who have been victimized have right of seeking reparation from the South African government? And there are people, I know at least 10 individuals who are documented in South Africa. Their shops were invaded and they now say, even if I receive assurances from government, I'm going home. But your life has been destroyed. Will the South African government make ex gratia payments? And if they file the suit, where will they file the suit? Will they file the suit in South Africa, or they can file the suit in their own countries? And then how do they enforce those things? These are things that I'm sure are going on in the minds of individuals. And I know for a fact that there is a group in Zambia who are actually thinking of filing a suit against the South African government in this regard. Interesting questions.
Oh, thank you, Prof. And we have Real Heal says from South Sudan, Professor PLO, continue to teach Africa. We shall be grateful and strong in time to come. And we have Eugene. Eugene says, what advice would Prof Lumumba give to an early career law student who's trying to find footing in academia, law practice, and consulting?
I think don't spread yourself too thin. My own view is that when you are a young academic, and a doctor here will tell you one of the things, if you want to be an academic, you've got to acquire higher degrees. There is no doubt. You've got to go for your master's, you've got to go for your PhD, and then you move in the direction of specialization. There must be one thing that you make the claim, this is my area. And in that way, you then don't spread yourself too thin. But these are early days. And the question that you've asked is very relevant. You may think that you are interested in artificial intelligence law or aviation law or commercial law now. But as you get into the profession, some people prefer to go into practice in the hope that they are going to pick and choose. But if you get good mentorship early, even at the university, there's no shortage of individuals who will guide you in the right direction. And your own passion, as you get into the fourth year of study, if yours is a 4-year program or third year of study, if it is the 3-year program, you'll begin to now have conversations with your lecturers. Tell them this is what my interest is, and expose yourself. Ask why your lecturers to carry you along when they are going for this or that seminar, if they can. And in that way, you begin to sample. Is like wine tasting. you sample this, sample that, and then you say, this is what I want to work on. And you work on it in that regard. But don't take too long thinking, because otherwise you'll become a generalist, and what you now say is that money is the alpha and omega, and that academics don't matter anyway, they have no money anyway. That is how you rationalize.
Okay. Prof, my name is Edil Omar, a second-year law student. On matters corruption, how can Kenya transition from enacting anti-corruption laws to enforcing them, despite a historical culture of institutionalized graft?
I think I follow this quite closely, and I talk to ESCC quite closely. And right now, there is a move to give prosecutorial powers to the Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission, because we are now beginning to feel the impact of corruption. You know, for a long time, people thought corruption is something that happens up there. But when universities are now in trouble, when people cannot receive salaries, when you go to primary schools and secondary schools and your ministers are admitting that we don't have money, when you don't have the basic things, corruption is the road is meeting the rubber. And when the road is meeting the rubber and you are beginning to see some individual in your village who did not step into anybody's school is the one ruling the roost, then you begin to say, no, we cannot allow this to happen. This is what happened in countries like Bangladesh, whose prime minister is now run away in India. This is what happened in Madagascar. We do not know where the president is. This is what happened in Sri Lanka. As I speak to you now, the former minister for finance in Ghana is away in the United States. The former petroleum minister in Nigeria is also running away. As I speak to you, the former minister for finance in Malawi is also facing charges. It's happening in Africa. Africans are now beginning to realize that corruption, as Kofi Annan once said, is a cancer that ultimately affects every society and every segment of the society. Then we begin to wake up. And I think Kenya is reaching that stage, and I love it.
Thank you very much, Prof. I don't know how much I can thank you for just honoring our call and just coming on board to talk to the future lawyers of Africa and how they can become this lawyer that really is distinguished in the same footsteps like yours. So I'll invite you to give a few concluding remarks before we close the session.
Thank you very much, Dr. for inviting me to share my thoughts with the Pan-African students of law. My message to you: there is nothing greater than excellence, nothing greater than humility. There is no substitute for hard work, no substitute for discipline, no substitute for humility. That combination is what creates an ethical lawyer. And an ethical lawyer is what this continent needs. It is what the world needs. A lawyer who is at peace with his or her conscience. As I said, we live in a world where there are many things demanding your attention, testing your fidelity to truth and justice. But remember, being rich is not wanting more, but wanting less and focusing on what you need and serving humanity. We today talk about Ubuntu very loosely, but as I said at the very outset, making reference to the Yoruba Iwa, Ubuntu is about doing things that are beneficial. For those of you who are of the Christian persuasion, and even if you are not, I always find great wisdom, perhaps greater than the average Christian, in the story of the Good Samaritan. There is depth in that story because the world is full of bad Samaritans. Be a good Samaritan and it will be well with you. God bless you.
Amen. Thank you very much, Prof. And on that note, we come to the end of the beautiful session. And again, Prof, it's such an honor and we truly respect you and just look forward to every advice that you give on these aspects. And I'm sure our audience has really benefited from your wisdom and knowledge. Thank you and God bless you too.
Thank you very